This image here is the famous Mesa Arch in the Canyonlands National Park in Utah. I guess everyone knows it, or has at least seen a picture of it. I was there the first time this year, February, with my girlfriend. It was amazing for me because I was there the first time, and it was winter. It was really cold, really cold. It had like minus 13 degrees Celsius, but there was no wind, so it was quite comfortable still to stand there with warm clothes and everything. And since it was winter and it was not on the weekend, I think was it on the weekend? Can't remember. There weren't too many people there. We were like 3 or 4 photographers and like 5 or 6 other people watching the sunrise. And I had really amazing conditions because there was some mist in the valley or in the canyon. And I have never seen a picture with mist in the canyon. Maybe some of you have, I didn't. And that made it really special for me. I was really lucky, of course. And at the same time, I had a burning sky in the background with some nice clouds, red light, orange light, magenta, everything. And later on, the sun even poked through, so I also got the classic shot with the sun hitting the arch here and everything. But I kind of like this version even more because I like the burning sky, and at the same time, it's a bit more. It's a darker version, of course, because the sun wasn't out yet. And I just like the atmosphere in it here. So that's the reason why I want to demonstrate you some techniques, some other techniques, and my whole workflow, of course, on this image. Like in the other videos as well, I will always start with my first steps in Lightroom. I will prepare the image for Photoshop, show you some techniques I do here. I don't do much in Lightroom, it's just a preparation. And later on in the other chapters, I will go in detail about my advanced processing steps. There will be something new in this video. I will show you how I increase the depth of field in my image. It's called focus stacking. I guess many people heard about it. It's not as hard as it sounds. It's basically increasing the depth of field, like I said, because with a really small aperture, you get problems when you want sharpness overall, since diffraction will decrease the lens quality, the image quality. Because when let's say I use the aperture f22, then it might be possible to get the entire depth of field, or let's say the entire image in focus, but at the same time I lose overall sharpness. And to overcome this, there's this technique called focus stacking. It's basically 2 or 3 focal points in one image, or let's say 2 or 3 different focal points in one scene, and then merging them together in Photoshop. You often get problems when you have subjects really close to your lens, and at the same time you have interesting subjects in the background you also want to have in focus. And this was the case here in this image, because this rock here in the foreground was like 20 or 30 centimeters to my lens, and at the same time the wide vista in the background. And to get this sharp in one frame, it's almost impossible. And that's the reason why I will show you how I focus stack those images. At the same time, I will show you how I use 2 different exposures to get back information in the sky, since it was a really high contrasty scene, because I have the dark bow, the dark rock bow here, the arch in the foreground, at the same time the bright sky in the background. And I have a Nikon D810, and for all who know this camera, it's amazing. It has an amazing sensor, really high dynamic range, but it also struggles sometimes with those situations, and that's the reason why I just make 1 or 2 more exposures just in case. The problem was I couldn't make it properly because there were other photographers, like I said, and you weren't able to move around free. So when I went forward to the rocks to get this picture here, I had to ask, can I go forward? I will go back in a couple of seconds. And since conditions were changing really fast, I had to be quick. And that's the reason why I couldn't fire off like a couple 30 seconds or 25 seconds exposures. So I had to do it fast. So I made a 8-second exposure and a 3-second exposure. The 8-second exposure is a bit too dark, but it doesn't matter because the dynamic range of the Nikon is amazing, and it gives me enough detail on enough information in the histogram to work with it. So I'm fine at the end, and I don't print super large, so it doesn't bother me. And it's really not bad. You will see it in a couple minutes, in a couple seconds. Okay, enough talking about this scene. Like I said, there will be some new steps in the other chapters, but right now I will do my basic editing. Here you can see the finished image. It's already processed and sharpened. I really like it, but I of course first of all have to start with the raw files. So to get there, I will press G, and here I have the raw files. I have copies there, but I will start new. And when I press D, I come to the processing, to the develop module. And when I press I, then I get the informations. And here you see my settings. It was a 8-second exposure at f11, ISO 64, basic ISO from the Nikon D810. 18mm was the focal length, and I used the Tamron 15 to 30mm. Okay, enough about the settings. This exposure here is the brighter one, even when it's a bit too dark still, but like I said, I have enough information. And it's also the one which was focused on the foreground here to get sharpness overall here in this rock, because it was really close to the lens. And the other exposure is for the background and also for this top arch here, since it's a bit more far away than the rock here. It's not recognizable on the image, but there's a difference, like 1 or 2 meters even. So it's better when I use the one with the focal point somewhere here, because then I have better sharpness here. Okay, but first of all, I will do my basic editing on this raw file. And the first steps I always do is I go to the camera calibration module and I change the profile to camera neutral. This is my basic profile, and I use it 90% of the time, especially in really high contrast scenes, because the Adobe standard profile already adds a lot of contrast to the image, and this makes it harder for me to process it later on. At the same time, I don't like the colors as much, so that's the reason why I use camera neutral. It's a bit softer. And at the same time, I increase the saturation in the blue channel. The reason is I don't like it how vibrance and saturation work with the colors. It's just a bit too much for me. I like colorful images, and I like contrasty images, everything. I do a lot of editing in this case, but I do it the most time in Photoshop. And to have a good starting point, I experienced that working with the blue channel gives me the best results. And I always start something at around 50, and then I work further with it. Usually I increase it a bit more, but in this case it's a good starting point. And when you saw my other images, then you saw that I do it all the time. So that's one of my basic steps. Okay, right now you see the image is way too blue. That's the reason the white balance is off. So I have to adjust it. Since it was dark in the foreground and snow and everything, the camera had trouble on auto white balance, but it doesn't matter. I work with the raw file, so I always have the information and the possibility to readjust it later. And I want it warmer, of course, because the light was already really red and shining through. So I will increase it, and there you see, oh yeah, looks way better. Something around 9250. That's the white balance I like the most. And at the same time, I will increase the tint, because I want to get back this magenta light in the background and at the same time on the foreground rocks here. Something around +3. And there you see the sky now, amazing, really nice light, nice light in the valley, perfect. That's what the white balance can change. You see that the sky is a bit too bright, but it's okay. Like I said, I have another exposure for the sky, and but at the same time, I want to keep it, even when I have another exposure, I want to keep it a bit brighter, because the sun was about to hit through here, And this is a really bright scene. I don't want to darken it down and then destroy the mood like you can see here. I want to keep it brighter so the eye has something to look at, and at the same time you know, okay, there's the sun about to come out. So it helps the image in my opinion. Okay, the next step is increasing the exposure because, like I said, the image is still a bit too dark. Something around this here. This is no problem for Nikon. When you see here, everything is fine. And then I will decrease the highlights, but not too much because I wanted to keep the highlights a bit brighter, so it's easier for me to make a selection later on in Photoshop to work in the other exposure. Okay, then I will increase the shadows a bit and also the blacks, so the image is not too dark. Something like this. Okay. Contrast is now gone almost, so I will want to bring it back a bit, but not much because most of the adjustments will be done in Photoshop. And I also want to add some clarity. Clarity is like micro contrast. It makes the image look a bit crisper, but I don't want to overdo it because it starts to look off really quickly. There you see here, doesn't like it, looks like a sausage or something. I don't want this. I will just keep it really low so I have a good starting point, and like I said already, detail and other adjustments will be done in Photoshop later. Okay. There's a little blue cast here in the snow, but that's fine. But I want to decrease it a bit, and to do this I will just decrease vibrance by some points, and that means I will decrease blue because vibrance works with the blue tones. You can play yourself with that. You see here the snow? When I decrease it here, yeah. At the same time I can work with luminance and increase the blue tones a bit to brighten up the snow. Not so much, something like 11, because there's blue in the snow, and when I brighten it up, then I also brighten up the snow. Okay, looks good so far, as a starting point of course. I want to get back some color, so I will increase the blue channel a bit, but that looks so okay for me so far. Now I will go to lens corrections, remove the chromatic aberrations and enable the profile corrections, and I will decrease the vignetting removal because I want to keep the corners a bit darker, so it helps me to guide my eyes. Distortion removal is fine for me. I don't use it all the time, and when I use it, it's almost one of the last steps because it slows down Lightroom, so I will do it at the end, or almost at the end. Okay, looks nice. And now I will start with sharpening. There is a method I always use, and I found out it works the best with my camera. So I use the amount of 45 overall sharpening, yeah. Then I decrease the radius so it's not too strong, and at the same time I increase the details so I have some nice micro contrast. And then I will mask it out by pressing Alt and press the slider to not have it in the sky or in the fog in the valley. Something like this. Noise removal, I don't need it because when I look here, like I said, it's fine. There's almost no noise at all. And when you see here, I have nice sharpness here in the foreground, but when I go to the background, here you see, here there's some blur. And that's the reason why I need focus stacking, because I focused somewhere here, so to have all the nice sharp informations here. But it was not enough depth of field, so I lost all the sharpness in the background and also on the top here, and that's the reason why I need the second focal point. And that's what I will actually start doing now. I will go to the second raw file, press G, here it is, press Ctrl and click on it, and then I will sync the settings, press synchronize, and there you see it synchronized the settings. When I click here, it's of course important that you marked all the boxes here, and you see it's darker. Of course it's darker because I had only a 3-second exposure. But now you see, there's a lot of information here in the sky compared to here. Okay, I don't even need it that dark, so I will increase the exposure a bit more, because I also need something here on the back, on the bow here, on the arch here on the top. But even when I increase it by 2.5 stops, you see there's not much noise. Can you see that? That's amazing. But now I lost information in the sky again, so I have to go down with the highlights. And since I said I want to keep the bright point here because the sun is almost about to poke through, it's fine for me. Perfect. And just in case, I will remove some of the noise. Even if there's not much noise, I will go to onto detail and add some luminance noise removal, something like 11. Not much, should be fine. Yep, looks good. And now when I watch the two images, you see here, it's blurry in the foreground, yeah, and sharp in the background. You see? Because I focused somewhere here. Huh? And that's the reason why I like focus stacking. So later on in Photoshop, I will use the top part here for my sharpness here in the background, and this image will be used for this part here for the sharpness in the foreground. Okay? I think I can brighten it up even a bit more. Or let's say, oh, sorry. Maybe I will go down with the exposure here so it's a bit more even. Yeah, something like this. And you also see the image is a bit moving. That's the reason, because of the reason is the two focal points. There's no exact there's no exactly aligned image when you use two different focal points, and that's the reason why we need Photoshop to overcome this issue, because when I just overblend those two images, then you will have some weird edges and ghosting because they're not aligned. So that's the reason we have to do it later and be exact to make it look good. Okay, but those are the steps in Lightroom, and I'm pretty much done now. Looks everything fine for me. In the next chapter I will show you, how I said already, I will show you how I blend those images together. The good thing is I can use the focal point for sharpness in the background also for my sky, so exposure blending makes it a bit easier. And at the same time I will use it also for the arch here on the top. But so far so good. These were my steps in Lightroom, and yeah, see you in the next chapter.